in Bristol. So for those of you who've been engaging and giving us provocations and great questions over the last couple of days, thank you. And for everyone here joining us at We the Curious in Bristol, it's fantastic to have you, our full house today, and we're looking forward to so many conversations. My name is Savita Wilmot. I'm Chief Executive of the Natural History Consortium. We're a charity, we're a collaboration of these 13 organizations down at the bottom of the screen. Our partners have been working together for over 20 years, finding new ways to connect people and nature and bring partners together to share their learning. It's amazing to think that Communicate has been happening for such a long time, over 20 years, and how much communication has changed. Now, people always ask me, where does the content for the conference come from each year? And it's very much from all of you, from the community. So the very first place we look is the evaluation that we received from the previous year, all those kind of ideas and questions and ideas for speakers that you gave us. And then so many of you email us throughout the year or get in touch and say, you know, this is what's coming across my desk. This is what feels urgent. This is what feels challenging. And we pull it together. And our committee, made up of representatives from all of our organizations, sift through every single thing we get to pull the conference together. We also set a theme, and this year, one strand and one theme came through more than anything else. What we heard from people in every part of the sector, in every part of the country, was that it's really hard out there right now. And we were hearing stories about, societal division, about political changes, about funding challenges, around, different kinds of pressures on organizations, and also internally as well. Some people have been working in the sector a really long time, and others are new and trying to find their place in it. So we chose the theme of Against the Odds. And when we set that theme, there was one or two people we called pretty much straight away. And as I introduce our first speaker, I think you'll come to see why she was one of the first people that we called. Now, a little bit quickly about how to navigate the day. We're all here together first thing in the morning, our online audience and all of you here. We're going to meet back here at 3:45 p.m. today. What happens between now and then is really up to you. This is very much a kind of choose your own adventure kind of day. If you're online, there's a number of sessions to click around. If you're here with us in Bristol, make your way around any of the 3 sessions. We've got a field trip down the road. We've got some outdoor space if you want some fresh air. It's really here for you to make the most of and make some connections. A really special thank you to say to the Economic and Social Research Council who supported us today. Also the Ecological Citizens Network, who made it possible for us to have bursaries across all 3 days of our conference and online to bring community and underrepresented groups. I also want to point out David, who's at the back. No pressure, David, if you're here in Bristol. David's here from the National Community Lottery Fund, ready to talk to you about your projects and what funding is on offer. So really make the most of your day. So without further ado, it's a real honor to welcome conservationist and author Mary Colwell to the stage.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Communicate, for asking me. It's an absolute honor to be here. So I'm going to put my very cheap Asda glasses on because I forgot my posh ones. It's a great title, Against the Odds. So what do you do when you're faced with the enormity of what's happening? We are, as Charles Dickens said, in the best of times and in the worst of times. And the worst of times is absolutely no surprise to anyone here, because, for a start, we're experiencing dangerous political and ideological shifts, which are quite simply terrifying. The rise of authoritarianism propped up by lies, fear, ignorance, and baseness, and all the division and the chaos that goes along with that. And we're watching environmental crises unfold on a scale unknown in human history. We're drowning in plastic waste, we're being poisoned by pollution. The climate of the Earth is rising rapidly, which is affecting every single aspect of life. And heartbreakingly, we're seeing a loss of wildlife around the world to the tune of over 70% less massive wildlife on Earth than when I was a child. I know I'm not alone in feeling that I'm standing on the edge of uncharted territory, and I'm very fearful of what lies ahead. So what could possibly be the best of times? Well, we possess more knowledge, technology, and communication than ever before. We know what to do. We have the means to do it, and there's no shortage of cash if only it was directed into the right places. We have unparalleled scientific understanding about how to put things right. And when it comes to repairing environmental damage, of course, there's always more to know. But if we did nothing else, we still have enough knowledge right now to halt this decline to extinction. And we have extraordinary technology to help us. I think the potential of AI is only just beginning to be explored, and that will help us sort out these massively complex issues in the environmental world. And we have communications network, which are immediate, efficient, targeted, and powerful. We know what to do, we know how to do it, we have the means to communicate it, and yet we're failing. So, the best of times and the worst of times. So what can you do as an individual in the midst of all this confusion, all this division? And Against the Odds, Savita is such a good title. So I have been asked just to talk a bit about what I have done. And the very first thing I recommend is to find your inspirational heroes. You know, as Samuel Johnson put it, even a little bit of hope gives us courage. And this world needs courage like never before. And I have many heroes that I turn to give me hope. People have battled great odds before, and their courage and vision brings light and hope into today's world. So, one of my first, Beethoven. Art demands from us that we don't stand still. I'll seize fate by the throat, and it shall certainly not wholly overcome me. And then, great lover of the outdoors and the natural world, the woods, the trees, the rocks, give man the resonance he needs. And when listening to Beethoven's disturbing, beautiful, tender, dramatic music, I feel like that little small boat adrift on a vast ocean. I'm at the whim of unpredictable storms and tides, but also great depth and gentleness. And despite his appalling physical and emotional pain and living through war and poverty, he still wrote music that vibrates with the power of humanity. And he speaks to our turbulent times. He's the very essence of triumph against the odds. He turned rage, passion, agony, and desolation into music that expresses where words fail, and he turned despair into hope. My second environmental hero is an activist. The 19th century naturalist and explorer was born in Scotland in 1838 and then moved to America as a child to grow up in a harsh frontier family. His name is John Muir. And just as a quick, can anybody, who's heard of John Muir in this room? Ooh, that's pretty good. Well done, because a lot of times I ask that question and not many people have in the UK anyway. That's brilliant. And despite his childhood, which we'd actually called abusive today, his love of the natural world only grew. He wrote such engaging, spiritual, and powerful words. He caught the attention of the American people and, crucially, the President of the United States of America. And he inspired the establishment of America's national parks. As he said, everyone needs beauty as well as bread, places to play in and to pray in. Muir was a tireless advocate for wilderness. At the time when people's relationship with nature was scientific, intellectual, and exploitative, he swam against the tide, and he urged a personal and an intimate relationship with nature. He actually wanted people to love it, which was very different to anybody else who was writing at the time. It set him apart, and it makes his message bang on for today. through his passionate writings, and if you haven't read any of his books, please, please do. He taught that nature is not just a luxury or something to be used to boost an economy. It's a necessity for the human soul. He changed the exploitative heart of America, and he broke through that cold, hard shell of indifference, and he saved wildness. These words he wrote could have been written by any wellness pamphlet or book today, although that word was unheard of in the 19th century. In every walk with nature, one receives far more than he seeks. And this one, isn't this true? Thousands of tired, nerve-shaken, over-civilized people are beginning to find out that going to the mountains is going home. And when we try to pick out anything by itself, we find it is hitched to everything else in the universe. His understanding of the interconnectedness of life was generations ahead of his time. If you're looking for a good book on John Muir, I happen to have written one, and in the true BBC balance, because I was a radio and television producer at the Natural History Unit, in true BBC balance, there are others available, but they're not as good. But anyway. So, where have I put all this inspiration and solace that I get from my heroes? Well, you can read and you can love and you can understand them and you can empathize with them, but in the end you have to choose your own path. And when you do that, whatever path it is, love it with all your soul. Love it with all your soul. And that word love isn't one to be taken lightly. It's not some pink roses and soft music. Love is tough and it's gritty, and it means being knocked over and standing up again, and it means commitment, and it means standing with it no matter what happens to you. That's what love is. And what I chose, and where I felt I could make a contribution, was in two areas. The first was this beautiful, beautiful bird called the Eurasian curlew. Who's heard of a curlew? Even more, fantastic. And you'd be surprised how many people haven't. And just for 1 minute, we talk a lot about nature, don't we? Especially in meetings like this, we do a lot of thinking and talking, but we don't do a lot of listening. The absolute essence of wild places. It's a beautiful, heartfelt, intertwined song of love and yearning, loss, and whatever you want to put on it. But it's truly beautiful. And the Eurasian curlew just speaks to me. I don't know why, it just does. So in 2015, a paper came out in British Birds, which described it as one of the most pressing bird conservation priorities in the UK. We've lost over half of our breeding curlews in just 20 years. Look at the BBS graph there on the right, plummeting down to zero. And the map on the left with all the grey squares is where the birds are thinning out and disappearing. So we're losing about 5,500 birds a year. And it is now the most pressing conservation concern in the UK. So faced with that, what do you do? With the enormity of the odds that are stacked against a bird like the curlew, which is nothing less than the way we live our lives in the 21st century. So what I did was I walked from the west coast of Ireland, all the way through Ireland, all the way through Wales, all the way across to the east coast of England, to find out why they were disappearing, to talk to the people, to scientists, artists, poets, bird watchers, farmers, anybody, hunters, anybody that would talk to me. That's me finishing at the East Coast. Look at that little face. I look so hopeful. I just thought, look, I know now. I know what to do. We're just going to do it. It didn't work out like that. And I wrote a book called Curlew Moon about that and what I find out. And there are no others available, actually, because I don't think anybody has done that walk before or since. So immediately, I set up 4 national conferences, England, Ireland, Scotland and Wales, and brought together people that wouldn't normally sit in the same room, and certainly didn't back in 2016. And that was grouse moor owners, that was Basque, it was Countryside Alliance, it was with the RSPB, with the BTO, with the Wildlife Trust, everybody, all in the same room, saying, we love this bird and we all want to protect it. So how can we work together to do it? And I set up World Curlew Day, which is on April the 21st, which is now celebrated globally. And we have an art and poetry competition every year through Curlew Action, so I look forward to all your entries this year. And do you know how you set up a World Day? Anybody done it? You just say it. You just phone people up and say, April 21st is World Curlew Day. And they go, that's handy, we can do things. Because it gives you a peg to hang something off. It allows people to get involved. You don't have to be a conservationist. You don't have to be a scientist. You can just write a poem, or you can bake a cake, or you can have a coffee morning, or you can sing a song. You can do anything, as long as it celebrates a part of the natural world. Also, it just so happened that then Prince Charles, now King Charles obviously, it caught his attention too, and he held 2 Curlew symposium of his own, and one in Dartmoor on the left and then one at Highgrove. And just a quick anecdote about the Dartmoor one. Absolutely nobody who organised the Dartmoor meeting told me I'd be sitting next to him. I didn't know till the morning I turned up, and I'd spent the night in our camper van in the car park outside. And my tights didn't match my skirt, because I picked the wrong pair up. And we talked about how terrible a state it was for curlews. And somebody in the audience said, well, why don't the BBC make a documentary on curlews? And because of my background, I said, well, look, that's never going to happen. Curlews don't have claws and big teeth, and they don't chase antelopes. So they're just not sexy enough for television. And Prince Charles then stood up and looked at me and he said, I entirely disagree with you. He said, I think curlews are sexy. In fact, they're damnably sexy. So it takes a prince or a king to establish something called the Curlew Recovery Partnership England, which got together as a round table of major organisations. I'm the chair, and Ryan Burrell is the director, and I also set up my own charity, Curlew Action. And if you're in any doubt as to the enormity of the problems being faced by curlews, and I won't go into these now because there isn't time, but this was sent to me by a good friend of mine in Ireland who had a camera trained on a nest in County Kerry. Now, County Kerry, obviously in the Republic of Ireland, in the 80s there were 5,000 to 7,000 breeding pairs of Eurasian curlew in Ireland. It's a national treasure of a bird. Last year there were 95, okay?
This could be the last curlew to breed in Kerry. Hopefully not. And we will do everything we can to make sure that's not the case. But as things stand, on this day, the 6th of May 2023, this is the last remaining curlew breeding in County Kerry.
And that bird is now gone. And you know, we have a big issue, we have a big problem, because if you look at the map on the left, that's where most people live in the UK. Look at the map on the right, that's where most curlews live in the UK. We don't live where there are curlews. So people don't know about them, they don't know their story. That's up to you guys. We need to tell nature's story, and we need to get it out there in passionate, accessible language. And that goes for all of wildlife as well. Again, the map on the right, where most people live. The map on the left, where there's most improved farmland. That's where there's least wildlife. So most of us live where not much wildlife exists. So we have to take the stories to the people, which is why conferences like Communicate are so important. These statistics came out in 2019. Do you know that 50% of children who were questioned couldn't identify a nettle, they can't name a robin, they don't know what a bumblebee is as opposed to a wasp, and 90% hadn't a clue what a cabbage white butterfly was. So those are pretty shocking statistics. So back in 2011, I set out a campaign to establish a GCSE in natural history to embed it into the heart of schools. It took till 2022 for it to be announced in the Natural History Museum in London. That's me with Caroline Lucas, who was massively influential in helping me, and Tim Oates, who is a very influential educationalist. So we, the three of us, we were like the last of the summer wine for the GCSE in natural history. Campaigned, banged tables, literally Caroline chased ministers down corridors and got them to agree to meetings. Tim worked through the educational system, which if you're not an educationalist is literally impossible to understand the language, let alone how it works. And so the three of us managed to get the Conservatives to agree with it. Unfortunately, they didn't get it through the system in time before the general election. Labour came in, said, oh, we're not having that. That's a Conservative initiative, damn cheek. And they threw it out, but we managed again, with even more table thumping, to get it back in. So it's still on the agenda, and it should be in schools in about 2 or 3 years' time, I suppose, if we're lucky. But the thing is, you don't achieve anything, not just what I've done, but anything, unless you stick at it. Like I said, unless you love it, unless it means something to your soul, unless you're prepared to do what it takes. And that does mean taking the body blows. And that does mean not getting discouraged. And that does mean crying yourself to sleep at night and getting up and doing it anyway. And it does mean taking the highs when they happen. And there are lots of highs, and there's lots of positives. But it's not a straightforward journey. It's a long journey, and like any long journey, which is why I love doing long walks, you have to go through it to get to the end. So, a river cuts through rock not because of its power, but because of its persistence. Thank you very much for listening, and I hope you have a wonderful conference.
Thank you so much, Mary, and I think you can see why we wanted you to open up our conference and this theme of Against the Odds. I mean, I think we're at a really interesting time in the calendar because we're all sort of starting to look forward, to 2026 and kind of closing down. We're kind of coming into our wintering season. What are you hopeful about? What are you hoping to do in 2026?
Carry on. I mean, just carry on. I mean, nothing's over the line yet. The GCSE in natural history constantly needs pressure. And what you find if you ever run, I'm sure if you have run a big campaign, unless you have someone who's leading the charge, who's willing to keep banging the tables, make a pain in the arse of themselves, keep asking people if they've done what they need to do, unless you keep doing that, it doesn't happen. Because that's always on the edge of people's desks, isn't it, when you're breaking new ground. So you just keep going. And until that GCSE is actually out there and available for schools to take, that campaign won't stop. And there's a lot of work still to do on it, there really is. And with curlews, the threats they face are existential. They lay their nests, they lay their eggs on the ground, in the middle of farmers' fields, on the edge of moors. They just lay their eggs on the ground. And we do everything we do on the ground. So we walk across it, we build houses on it, we put our factories on it, we walk our dogs on it. It's open to climate change, we plant forestry on it. Everything that we do happens on the ground. And therefore, although it sounds quite niche to be into curlew conservation, it's not. It's about everything. If you care about curlews, you are pitched into the biggest battles that conservation faces. And so those battles continue.
Right. I'm just we have only got a few minutes, but I did want to bring in our audience either online or in the room if anyone has a question for Mary, or otherwise I'll get to continue. Right, I'll let you think and enjoy your coffee. Actually,
Hi, thank you. That was a really impressive introduction. With regards to the curlew, what were the solutions? If there were 2 or 3 things to focus on, like actions that policy or some of us here could take, what would they be?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question, and thank you for that. We have to get our agri-environment schemes right. We have to pay farmers decently to do the right thing. And at the moment, there's not enough in the agri-environment schemes to protect ground nesting birds in the middle of working landscapes. And it's not just a matter of protecting that nest there. if the nest over there or the field next door has forestry planted on it or has a lot of predators that live on it. And that's the other thing. We've got to deal with the enormous number of mesopredators in this country. And that's a very, very difficult thing to talk about, as I know. We have the densest population of foxes and crows in Europe, and they eat ground nesting birds and chicks. So we have to face that one. You can't hide and just hope nature sorts it out. We're not in that space anymore. We're in a very, very different man-made space. So how we deal with agricultural payments, how we get that right at landscape scale, and how we deal with the high levels of predation, those are the things that are affecting a lot of wildlife.
Sorry, Amelia, we're going to get you to run all the way to the other side now. We'll get a second microphone going here as well.
Sorry, I can shout really loud as well. So, hi, Mary. I was just really interested in how you found your purpose, like finding that thing that feeds your soul. I think so important. And you talked about the fact that young people don't know about necessarily bumblebees or all of these things that actually, as we grow into adulthood, particularly people who care about the environment, we find those things that feed our soul. And I'm just really interested in what your thoughts are on how we can, obviously, you've got your GCSE, but with younger students and key stage 11 to 14 is the age group that we work with at Solutions for the Planet, how can we really get young people exploring what their passions are and their purposes are? Because curlews, they do feel quite niche in a way, and I hadn't realised the sort of massiveness, that's not really a word, but like the sort of size of the issue. So yeah, and you also can feel like if you do go too niche, then you're not doing enough. So I think that's a real challenge in this sector for us, like in the environment sector. So yeah, how would we support younger people in that space?
Yeah, and that age group 11 to 14 is absolutely vital, because you're pushing against an open door with primary school kids. That they love nature, and we just need to get more of it into primary schools and they'll suck it up. But once you get to about 11, 12, 13, other things come a bit more cool. And I think the only thing we can do is make nature really live in young people's lives again. I think one of the problems is we think nature's out there. We have to get on a bus or a car and go to somewhere to see it. And we have to change that. Nature's what you see every day on your walk to school or in your garden or down in the park. And when we get people completely engrossed in what's right in front of them and the magic of the ordinary, and to write a poem about it, to draw it, to keep a nature diary, do whatever it is you like. And one of the biggest annoyances that we had with, not annoyance, that's even not strong enough a word, was that the original GCSE proposal had a whole segment on the contribution nature makes to culture and how we relate to nature through music, art, poetry, literature, whatever. And the Conservatives took it out. They said it was a deal breaker, take that out or we won't go ahead with it. And I think that's such a shame, because we're relational people. We are human beings. We relate with our emotions. And so if we can get kids to engage in a meaningful way with what's under your feet and what's around you, that will begin to change. And there's lots of exciting ways to do that. But get rid of this idea that nature, we've got to go and see it somewhere else. It has to live with you. And then you've got to tell the right stories that fire that age group. And it's all about stories, as everyone in this room knows.
That's brilliant. We've got time for 2 more questions. So one from you, and then I'll finish off, if that's all right. Yeah, it's great to wait for the microphone. Just got lots and lots of people online, and they can hear you if you've got the microphone.
So thank you, Mary, for that introduction. It was absolutely inspiring. You've obviously focused on the curlew, and that's wonderful. And obviously, for most people in this room, we understand that the curlew is connected to a much, much wider picture. But how do we stop these individual campaigns on the curlew, saving the curlew, or let's say saving the panda, or those kind of quite focused campaigns, from becoming silos and losing sight of the much bigger picture of how interconnected absolutely everything is?
Yeah. I mean, I agree. I think it's just a matter of balance, and again, it's about how we tell the story of the curlew, or the panda or the nematode or whatever it is that, you know, floats your boat. With curlews, I think, again, it's about... There's nothing wrong with focusing on an individual species because that's who we are. And I think, you know, I find it hard to relate to nature. I know what you mean, but I don't know how to relate to it because it's just too big. So for me, I have to relate to something. And I think as long as you... For me, what Curlew Action tries to do is to say, love the curlew, because people do love them. When you know them, you love them. But it's not just about this. It's about the lapwings that are just there. It's about the worms they eat. It's about the wildflowers that grow around them. And it's about the farming practices which are bearing down on top of them, which is nothing to do with farmers and everything to do with the way the system works. It's about story. It's about how you go from the particular to the big. And that's the arc of storytelling, isn't it? I mean, everybody here knows that. So if you just say, we want to fill the world with curlews, that will never be the case. That will never fire anybody up. But if we save the curlew, you save our soils, you save other ground-nesting birds. Look at what we do for wildflowers. Look at what we do for meadows and open spaces. That you begin to start to have a conversation about big picture stuff through something that you can love.
Brilliant. We're just about out of time, and we're going to be moving into our next sessions. But I just wanted to finish, I guess, with a question about stories, because we've got a room full of storytellers here and an online group of storytellers, all ready to kind of tell bigger and bolder stories, I think, is what we're hearing against the odds. So if you had, I guess, a final message for this group of, you know, where we might want to focus more, focus less, and go forward together.
Don't just speak to the converted, and don't just be comfortable with the people you feel comfortable with. You know, get in there with the people you don't feel comfortable with and start talking to them about shared passions. That's what works. So, you know, I'm not a great fan of grouse moors, but I work very closely with grouse moor owners. And it's really, really important that we do that we get out of the silos. We're all too similar, we're all too comfortable. Don't worry about being challenged. Don't worry about being uncomfortable. Embrace it, actually, and look on it as what you're paid to do. Because if we only talk to each other, nothing will ever move on. That's what I think I'd like to say.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for setting up our theme. Can we have a